My personal view is that is child abuse. You should not be doing it because at such a young age, they're only curious about gender. They have no idea. There is no medical test that can prove that anyone is a transgender. It is something that people say verbally and self-identify. That does not make them transgender person. Young children who think at a young age that they're transgender eventually change their mind and say, no, I really wasn't. And in fact, I just recently wrote an article about this, about a girl who changed to a boy and said, we should understand as children we're always going to be conflicted about our bodies, but that does not make us transgender people. What we need to understand is who we are and not try to change who we are. I think there's a difference between reality and fantasy. And so we originally, as a transgender child, will live in fantasy, and then at some point they begin to live in reality and their mind changes. Many of the people that I've worked with have been physically abused, sexually abused, or emotionally abused, and as a result of that, they don't want to be the person who was abused, so they become someone different and they adopt the identity of a transgender so that they don't feel the pain that they once felt as the person who suffered that abuse. They don't want to be who they are. Gender itself is biological. Psychologically, you think you can change, but you can't, because you can't change your biology. Your biology remains the same no matter what you look like. You're still, a man cannot become a woman cannot become a man. They think they really change, and that's why it is referred to by some psychologists and psychiatrists as a delusional disorder. It's delusional, meaning you delude yourself to thinking that you've changed when you really haven't. I think there's a big mistake when we begin to affirm young people in changing genders. There's much more adults involved. It's a mistake to think that you can change genders when you cannot. So when you finally realize that you could never really become a different gender, that you'd been lied to, and you'd been manipulated into thinking that you changed genders and you just had surgery and people filled you with hormones, but the fact of the matter is you never really changed. So then you realize that's a big mistake. And so that's why in the UK Guardian, they reported that 1 out of 5 people will admit that they have made a mistake. And that's why up to 40% of people who change will attempt suicide out of depression and discouragement. Well, once I began to actually look at the literature and look at the studies and realize that I never changed, then I felt like I was living a masquerade. It was, I wasn't living real. It was just a costume, a cosmetic surgical costume. Well, many of the people won't realize this, that they made a mistake, until 5 to 15 years afterward. And then I've had people write to me and say that they realized it was a mistake, but it took them 30 years to admit that it was a mistake, because it is so difficult for anybody to admit they made a mistake. Saying you made a mistake about surgically going through a gender change is very difficult to come out and say, now what I did was wrong. So I think a lot of people repress their feelings about making a mistake and try to live it out. I think a lot of the gender ideology is more political than it is medical, because as it stands today, there is absolutely no medical proof that transgenders actually exist as a medical condition. There is no clinical test for people to say, I'm a transgender, give them a test, and prove that they're transgender. So absent of medical testing, then the only thing that we have to suggest they're transgender is psychological. I think people make a big mistake in assuming that when a person says they're transgender, that they're a transgender person. What I do is I ask each individual that I work with, tell me about your childhood. Tell me about when you felt like you were a transgender, and tell me what was going on in your life. What was your relationship like with your mother? What was your relationship like with your father? Were you ever sexually or emotionally abused? Did you have any serious loss in their life? And 100% of the time, these people that I work with can identify a specific time in their life that became so discouraging and so depressing for them that choosing a transgender identity was the way they wanted to escape from that pain that they felt.